Have you heard of Huawei? I bet you have. They make cell phones that are sold throughout Canada, but they make more than just phones. They make deep telecommunications infrastructure, the backbone of our phone networks, our internet, which basically these days are the same thing. And they're world leaders in what's called fifth generation or 5G internet technology that will be blazingly fast. We'll think it's instantaneous. Download entire movies on your phone in less than a second. That's just what the consumer experience could be like, but imagine all the data that could be moved that fast. It could control anything, everything from cars to airplanes, from factories and dams to defense systems. It's almost here, and Huawei is a world leader in manufacturing the hardware that would run 5G. Forget about hand phones. That's the fun stuff. Huawei builds the system, except as you can tell, Huawei is a Chinese company, as in communist China, where every strategic company is under the control of the government, the dictatorship, and where warfare is fought increasingly online. China's battle against the Hong Kong democracy activists, for example, it's not mainly fought with bullets. It's fought with facial recognition software that can identify people at a glance. It's with GPS in cell phones, so the government can tell who went to a demonstration. Hong Kong protesters tried to frustrate that technology by pointing lasers at police cameras, or even by trying projections of fake faces on top of their real faces. I'm not sure if those work, but what if your entire internet was built on Chinese systems? Would you literally trust a political enemy, a dictatorship, to build your national infrastructure? If you made a 911 phone call, it would go on Huawei. Military communications, satellites, alarm systems, the systems that control the launch of weapons, even nuclear weapons. I mean, that's just the hardware. And in a new series of laws, the first passed just this week, the next one to be passed on January 1st, China will bring in invasive measures to have backdoor access to encrypted secrets that pass through Chinese tech companies. There really is no dividing line between corporations and the communist government anymore. It's fashionable in the West to hate Mark Zuckerberg of Facebook for him snooping into your privacy. And there's a lot of justification for being wary of him, but Facebook is mainly just a place to chat with friends and share interests. Imagine giving Mark Zuckerberg access to everything you say, every email, every text, every place your GPS says you go. All right, Zuckerberg has probably most of that, but then imagine if Zuckerberg were a dictator, and I mean truly a dictator, who had the power of life or death over people, and that he built all the cell phone systems in the country so you couldn't just delete Facebook from your phone because it was the phone and the network underneath. That's Huawei. Don't take it from me, and don't think this is a right-winger being worried. Here's Susan Rice, Barack Obama's national security advisor, telling Canadians to beware.
It gives the Chinese the ability, if they choose to use it, to access all kinds of information, civilian intelligence, military, that could be very, very compromising. So much as I disagree with the Trump administration on a number of things, on this, their concern about Huawei, I believe they're right.
As a matter of protection, would the United States have to have a slightly different security relationship with Canada?
Yes, and that will throw the Five Eyes collaboration, which serves the security interests of every Canadian and every American, into jeopardy. It can't be done.
Can't share.
I don't see how we can share in the way we have. It's not a joke. It's truly serious.
All the Western democracies are worried about Huawei. Australia, New Zealand, the United Kingdom, along with Canada and the United States. Those are the Five Eyes countries. Those are the essential allies who can trust each other to share the most confidential military and diplomatic secrets. Well, not if China gets to see every message sent. Now, some people say that Huawei is just a company. Well, there's no such thing in communist China, especially such a strategic company. Scrolling through Huawei's Twitter feed is a bit absurd. It's hundreds of people around the world accusing Huawei of spying for the Chinese government. And it's Huawei writing back to all of them saying, no, no, that's not true. We'd never do that. Never, never, ever. Yeah, I'm not sure if a tweet is enough to convince people. You see, a few years ago, China was kind enough to build the new headquarters for something called the African Union. That's sort of an African version of the United Nations. And Huawei was kind enough to make it super high-tech with all the networking. And they did this with another Chinese company. But, uh-oh, here's a story from the Financial Times about how that ended. African Union officials have accused China of hacking its headquarters' computer systems every night for 5 years and downloading confidential data. Beijing funded the AU's $200 million building in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, while a Chinese state-owned company built it. So every night, China would just download every single thing from everyone in the building. State secrets, diplomatic secrets, military secrets, industrial secrets. That's just what they did every single night. They knew everything that every country thought was private. It's similar to what China did to Canada's leading high-tech company a few years back called Nortel. They just hacked and stole all the industrial secrets, destroying the company. But Huawei says, no, never. That's absurd. Trust them. I mean, here in Canada, they sponsor Hockey Night in Canada. They sure seem like Canadian patriots, unlike that Don Cherry, I guess. And they love showering the liberals with cash. They're smart that way. Now, it's illegal for companies, even Canadian companies, to donate money directly to a political party. So instead, Huawei donates it to a liberal front group called Canada 2020 that's run by Trudeau's close friend, Thomas Pitfield. Huawei knows how Trudeau works. And Huawei knows how money works, especially in low ethics jurisdictions like Trudeau's Canada. So Huawei recently partnered to provide fast internet to dozens of small, remote communities in Canada's far north. Of course they did. It's very strategic up there. The mineral wealth, surveillance of our coastline, military exercises, emergency response. Well, look, if we need broadband internet and fast cell phones in our north, let's build it. Let's spend the money to defend our sovereignty, not outsource the north to a Chinese company. But it's working. Huawei knows our pressure points. Just like Chinese spies know about how to corrupt a man, some men will take bribes, some men go for a honeypot trap. Same with a country.
So, I don't want to interrupt his speech, but I feel that there's a lot that I can tell you about this issue. A family member who was very close to me, he explained to me the power of Red China many times, because his country itself suffers greatly. That country is Vietnam. See, what nobody talks about in modern history and studying is that communism is still very much alive today. In my early education up to even high school, we're taught that communism is a thing of the past, but it's not. It is what I would reclassify the term red capitalism. And this is a perfect example of the state-run corporations in China that, whether people will admit it or not, these corporations can never be trusted because, number one, they've been known to inflate their assets, so investors get scared because they're always misrepresenting really what they are. And the second is that, of course, as Ezra Levant mentioned there, that the corporations do irrevocably answer to the government and any requests that the government makes, even if they say they're not, because they are under that power, that regime of communism. The element of power is still very much alive, and they answer to Beijing, of course. So, when our Prime Minister states in admiration for communist dictatorships. That is extremely, extremely disturbing to me. When our defense minister Harjit Sajjan goes and honors a communist regime, a communist, basically it's like propaganda, right? So these people were celebrating China and the anniversary of China in communist rule, essentially. So let's explain to you quickly what China's done to Vietnam. China installed puppets in Vietnam. Literal puppets. What they would do is, if they wanted to corrupt and occupy territory legally, right? Because you can't just go in and murder everyone. What they would do is they would capture the leaders of whatever state they were trying to occupy. And if they couldn't bribe them with money or women, then they keep raising the ante until they fold, or they kill that person. And the worst part is that they would replace them with a doppelganger, a Chinese doppelganger. So imagine a country willing to stoop to such dishonorable tactics that's an outright lie. This is how communism gained root in Vietnam. It wasn't by choice. It was sort of forced upon them by the bullet, the threat of the bullet. If you stand against China, you get the bullet. You may disappear. Your family might disappear, and so on and so on and so forth. So many innocent people have died as a result. Still continuing today. So the lesson that we must take away from it is never, ever, ever trust the Chinese in any regard. Red China, not generally Chinese people because they're suffering Chinese within their own country, but again, they suffer from the same problem, and that's the power of the bullet. And regarding those protesters, I mean, the facial recognition software that I find particularly disturbing, simply because it's, if implemented here, there's no doubt in my mind that Trudeau is working with Huawei. Ezra Levant didn't even have to present the correlation between that company, Canada 2020, and Huawei. It's obvious that they can donate, and there's probably more than one way that they donate. But essentially, what really disturbed me was, we just did a video on Catherine McKenna, and one of her main roles as the new infrastructure minister was she wants to create high-speed internet. What a coincidence. So what I'm thinking is that her post is completely controlled by Chinese special interests, which isn't a far leap considering what we just saw, and the concrete evidence that Ezra Levant has already presented. McKenna intends to corrupt our infrastructure with Chinese-controlled products, let's say, and Chinese-controlled infrastructure, and make inroads for Chinese communism to come here, or rather Chinese control. It would be a tremendous asset to Red China to have that kind of control over Canada. The ability to monitor any traffic, anything. That kind of data could help control elections, could help control what kind of dissent exists among the people, and help government to enforce against something like that. So essentially helping to bring government-controlled, because you've seen it with the police there in China itself, where many citizens tried to shroud themselves in Hong Kong. So again, I tell you, I have nothing against those people that desire freedom. They you know, it's the worst for the citizens within their own country whom actually aspire to be free, and who protest peacefully and so on. I have no problem with those Chinese. Many good Chinese there as well. I don't say everybody is bad, but I do say that the government itself is bad. That sort of evil mindset that completely disregards human life, and for them, life is cheap. If one person disagrees, they'll eliminate that person. Mark my words, and nobody will ever hear of it. They'll just disappear. So Trudeau is extremely irresponsible when it comes to this kind of corruption. A boy that doesn't know too much about how the world functions. But he's willing to trust China because they bring millions and millions and maybe billions to the table. And corrupted by the power of money. A small boy. One of the things that Trump was right about is that it's more than economic warfare. There was a great deal of spying that existed that the Americans most likely were aware of under Obama, but because of Obama, they were forced, I guess, to stand down, and they were unable to act because, of course, the Democrats were propped up by Red China as well. So this is an issue that, for me, Huawei is an extremely dangerous Chinese asset to bring into Canada. And if I was Prime Minister, they would never make it through the front gate. They'd be rejected ultimately, and they'd be banned from ever working in here, in this country. And I would go to great means to contact Trump and make sure that we're on the same page and share any technology that would prevent spying any further here in this country, so that North America could be unencumbered by nonsense and spying tech, let's say. See, when you talk about spying tech, the general response from people is that, oh, you know, you're paranoid and blah, blah, blah. This is the world as it is. No. We do not have to accept something like Huawei getting its claws into our country, into our infrastructure, and trying to literally expose before our eyes any kind of private information. That's the key. I don't believe in Facebook. I don't believe in Twitter. These things to me are an invasive tool in our society that violates privacy in every way. Even if you don't, even if you yourself control, very faithfully control your, let's call it your social network footprint, I guess. And if you try your best to control that, you still can't, because people around you will still access and use it. And I mean, the privacy, even if you yourself do nothing, will be exposed by another. But that's my rant on Facebook. You can choose to like it or you don't. Sometimes it's a device that can be useful, but to me, it's something that needs to be more and more accounted for in terms of privacy rights. Accountable, I mean. But Huawei itself, you must never underestimate the danger of allowing China to have that kind of power in another country. The cautionary tale from Africa, where they spent $200 million for that headquarters and then found out that they were spying the entire time. It is a perfect example in which we must take it as a cautionary tale never to trust that kind of Chinese that kind of Chinese special interest, let's say. It is so dangerous for them to make that kind of inroads here in Canada. And Catherine McKenna and Trudeau are outright proclaiming that they're going to support that kind of idea. So again, when we have radicals in power, and we have people that don't think ahead to the future, let's say, but they only care about the power of money. I don't care if Catherine McKenna tries to represent herself as climate change activist. She's nobody. In the end, they're corrupted by the power of money or power itself. And I think it's more likely that it is power itself as well. Money might be secondary, but power itself, ruling, that's what they love. So, my fellow Canadians, if you're watching this, this is again another reason why we should separate, because I really doubt if the West was free, that, or even if Alberta had its own, say, power of veto for something like this, that even if they made inroads in Canada, they could be prevented from working in particular provinces that reject the proposal, right? But again, that's infrastructure, and that might be a more complicated issue than just borders. But again, Trudeau's leadership has once more shown us how desperately irresponsible he is. And short-sighted and deeply corrupt, because if Canada is to be a free democracy, we cannot have spy networks existing here from a foreign dictatorship that ultimately seeks to corrupt and take advantage of our lack of privacy, let's see, because one never knows. That is a tremendous asset to a country that wishes control, I tell you. You could never, the amount of statistics data that they could gather from that about our tendencies, let's say, would be a tremendous use for anybody who seeks power to control the citizens. If you can predict the tendencies of the citizens, which you would be gathering that much data, you could have political power every single time, because it's instantaneous, as they said there. You could carefully monitor people's lives. You need a tremendous amount of infrastructure to do it. Millions of people working, but China has that. China has millions and millions of people working that could be put to that purpose. So they have that asset to process all that data, and they may not even need people to work it. God knows what kind of technique they'll use to mine the data and process it and study it and so on and so forth. But it is a cautionary tale. As soon as I saw this clip from Ezra Levant, I am very proud of the Rebel being the ones to take the initiative to show it, because when McKenna was talking about, we need faster internet, that is a pretense to let Red China control us and monitor us and feed that information back to the Liberal government to essentially suppress us or, control us, essentially. So, as radical and as unlikely and stupid as that proposition might be, it is becoming a reality and will be. So, what else can I say? This is a very, very dangerous circumstance that we find ourselves in. Thank you for your time and attention, and I bid you good day. Bye-bye.